Hi there, I'm Elizabeth from A Well-Purposed Woman, and today we're going to be taking these cool carvable pumpkins from the Dollar Tree and transforming them into some really high-end looking professional pumpkins for fall. These are probably one of the easiest pumpkin crafts that I'll share with you this year. You can literally do this if you have absolutely no crafting experience, but you get really professional looking pumpkins for fall. So I'm super excited about today's craft. One way you can participate in our craft is just let me know in the comments below which project is your favorite and where you're coming in or where you're watching from today. I love hearing from you, what you like and what you want to see more of. So just let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here, and let's get started on making some really cool pumpkins for fall. I'm calling this first craft Faux Boho Wood Pumpkin, but you can call it what you like. I started by taking a white pumpkin from the Dollar Tree, popped off the stem, and then took some of this gray chalk paint from Annie Sloan, and I painted the sections of the pumpkin with this gray color. I took the sticker off the bottom, and then just take your gray paint and color in all the indentations of the sections on the whole pumpkin. I allowed those gray lines to dry on my pumpkin, and then I took a whitish cream colored chalk paint and I covered over the entire pumpkin. I waited for the white chalk paint to dry as well, and then I took a copper colored Sharpie, and on each of the sections of the pumpkin I drew a vein running down the section, and then I just put leaves on both sides of that vein. And you can do whatever design you want for this. You could do polka dots, you could do triangles, you could do squares, you could do branches or flowers or whatever you want for your design. I like just a simple branch with some leaves on it. And so just do that repeat that design on each of the sections of your pumpkin. And then once you have your design, you're going to take your hot glue gun, and being very careful as always with the hot glue gun, you're going to outline that design with the hot glue and allow it to dry. Now, because these are carvable pumpkins, the hot glue might melt a little bit of the styrofoam, but it's not so significant where it's a problem. So just go over each of your marker lines with the hot glue, being very careful not to touch it and to allow it to dry before moving on to the next section. And then once your glue is hard and dried, then just go over the design with your paint again. And I use the white chalk paint since that's what color my pumpkin, and just color over all of those lines with your paint. And once you're finished painting your pumpkin, just take a stem. I used a real stem here. You can use a piece of wood or stem or cinnamon, whatever you're going to use for your stem. Hot glue that on the top of your pumpkin and paint it to match. Now, one last step you could do is take some antiquing wax and just rub it over the design of the pumpkin to make it look even more like a wooden pumpkin. But I didn't take the time to do that, and this is our final result. Very cute. You would never guess it started out as a carvable pumpkin. This next craft would be a perfect one for a centerpiece on a Thanksgiving table. And we're going to start again with our carvable pumpkin, take off the stem, and I just took a utility knife, and we're just going to cut out a circle in both the bottom and top of our pumpkin. Now, after doing this, I realized you really wouldn't have to do it in the bottom of your pumpkin. You could just do it on the top, but I did both the top and bottom. And then I took some of this gold trim I had got at Hobby Lobby for $1, I think. I had been saving this in my stash for a while and didn't know what I was going to do with it. Well, this craft really was the perfect project to use it with, and I'll show you towards the end. It just ended up being the perfect amount of trim. But I just took the gold trim, hot glued it onto my pumpkin, and then wrapped it around the outside of my styrofoam pumpkin, just being careful to overlap the trim so that it's pretty indistinguishable that we're using trim in the end. But just cover the entire outside of your pumpkin. Now I find it easiest when doing this to kind of bunch the trim all together and stick it through the pumpkin that way. You could, like I mentioned, just open up one of the sides of the styrofoam pumpkin, and then you could just cut the trim into little pieces and then just hot glue the top and the bottom in place. You wouldn't have to wrap it all the way in and out of the pumpkin. But I had the openings on both sides, so this is how I did it. Now, as I was doing this, I was torn between using my final result with a candle inside or with fall florals inside, and I ended up going with fall florals, but you certainly could also use this with a candle. I saw some cute little candles at Walmart actually that were in the shape of a birch branch, but it was a faux candle and it would just turn on and off, and you could certainly use that in the center of this pumpkin, or you could just do the fall florals. This little fall pick was from the Dollar Tree, and I used it along with some natural stems just to create this cute little centerpiece for fall. This would be perfect for a table for fall. It could also be a super budget friendly wedding decoration for a fall wedding at the tables. Wouldn't that just be gorgeous? And it is so inexpensive. With this next project, I took some trim that I had found on sale again at Hobby Lobby, this light blue and white striped trim. I removed the stem again from my pumpkin, and then I just cut the trim into these small little pieces that would fit from the top and bottom of the pumpkin. So I just cut corresponding strips out of all my trim, and you're gonna probably need a couple of spools of this trim. I used 2 to make the larger pumpkin, and then I did make a smaller yellow pumpkin with just one of the spools. So take the trim, and then I just took these little pins and I pinned it on the top and the bottom. You could also use your hot glue gun. Just pinned the trim on the top and bottom of my pumpkin, and I just overlap the trim slightly so that you don't see the pumpkin peeking through. It covers the pumpkin nicely. This was so easy, and I really hope you like how this turns out. But like all of these crafts, you can use any trim that you have on hand. You don't have to do the same look I'm doing. I hope all these projects will just inspire you to make crafts that are your very own. They don't have to look exactly like mine. I'm doing them as an example, but you do the trim that you like, and you can have these neutral colors, or you could do more colorful, whatever you prefer. And then once I covered the pumpkin, I took a Cinderella pumpkin stem that I had got off a pumpkin, and I just hot glued that in the center of the pumpkin. I took a little bit of twine once the stem had dried, and I just tied that around the stem, and here you go. This is our final result. Here's a little yellow one I did, and I did that one by using a styrofoam ball and just cutting off the bottom a little bit so that it was a different size. So you see the blue and the yellow, and they're so cute for fall. This next project is a sweater pumpkin. So you probably have seen sweater pumpkins all over the place, but this is a really easy way to make sweater pumpkins with absolutely no sewing, no messing with polyfill or rice. You're just going to cut off the top and the bottom again. And again, you actually could have just cut off the top. Looking back, I think that probably would have worked a little bit better, but then just stuff your sweater into the hole, and then you get a really cute and easy base for a sweater pumpkin. So I did the dark gray with the black carveable pumpkin, and then I did a white pumpkin with my cream colored sweater. I'll show you that in a minute here. But just hot glue the sweater into place so it doesn't move around, and then stick a stem in it. Here's my white pumpkin. And I actually use little birch logs in the center of the pumpkins for stems. Again, cut off the extra sweater and then just stuffed it in the bottom, hot glued it in place. And you get these really cute and really simple sweater pumpkins for fall. And you could just leave them like this. They're really cute how they are. I wanted to add a little bit of definition to the sections of my pumpkin. So on the white one, I just took some baker's twine and I just attached it around the pumpkin for some definition. And then I took a little bit of this leather, and I cut out a leaf and put it on my little pumpkin, and then some curlicues. I used the wire that was covered with paper. And then for the larger gray pumpkin, I had this chunky dark gray yarn which matched the sweater almost perfectly. So I just used that for my sections of the pumpkin, and I hot glued 6 different strands of the yarn around the outside of the pumpkin, creating these really pretty and fun sections on the pumpkin. And I think that really added to this pumpkin. It gave the sections definition and made the pumpkin look really cool. I don't think you would ever guess that this was just started out as a carvable pumpkin from the Dollar Tree once it's done. And you could do this sweater matching the yarn in any color. Like I could have done it with the cream as well. Then I put my little birch branch in the center for the stem. And then I took a couple more of those little green leaves from that fall pick, and there you go. There are my sweater pumpkins for fall, and they're so warm and cozy and so simple. No sewing involved, super quick and easy. And I just think they couldn't be much cuter. So those are our sweater pumpkins. Next, we're going to move on to a Mod Podge pumpkin. And with this project, we're going to be using some napkins. I got these again at Hobby Lobby. Started by taking off that stem on my carvable pumpkin, and I just took one of the napkins from the pack and covered the pumpkin completely with the Mod Podge, and just take a foam brush and just put a nice even layer all across the pumpkin. And then we're going to take the napkin and cut it in half, and then we're just going to cover the pumpkin with the napkin. So kind of just gently put the napkin around the pumpkin, trying to smooth out any of the bumps in it. But it really doesn't have to be perfect. I did have some bumps on mine, and actually it added a little bit of character, so I didn't mind it. Just do the best you can to smooth out the napkin along the pumpkin, and then cut any additional pieces of napkin that you need to cover the rest of the pumpkin with the Mod Podge. And then I just went over the top of the napkin again with the foam brush and just smoothed out the napkin on the pumpkin. You can use paper for this as well. The napkin worked pretty good because it was so thin, and then it lays pretty nicely on the pumpkin, but paper would also be an option. You would just have to really get it soaked with the Mod Podge. So once the Mod Podge had dried, then I just embellished the pumpkin by adding some baker's twine again around the sections on the pumpkin. And I tend to like a little more definition with my pumpkin sections, and so this twine was exactly what I wanted and needed. It fit the kind of theme of the napkin, I felt. But you could use anything you would want to make the sections of the pumpkin, and then just find a stem that you think matches the pumpkin well. I used, again, one of these Cinderella pumpkin stems. I love how they are so natural and rustic looking. And then I tied the twine around the stem again, and here's my pumpkin. And for the leaf of my pumpkin, I took that fall floral pick and I just took off some of those green leaves again and attached that right by the stem. And I felt like that was just what it needed to give it a perfect little touch. And here's our pumpkin. So cute, so fun and unique. I'm calling this next craft Boho Coastal because I think it kind of serves both purposes. But we're going to start with our carvable pumpkin, remove the stem, and then we're going to take fabric. Now you could do any kind of fabric pumpkin with this. I found this green stripe fabric, so I'm going to use that, but you can use anything you have on hand. And we're going to wrap the pumpkin with the fabric. So this is a really easy way to make fabric pumpkins. No sewing, just super quick. You could have a centerpiece for your table within minutes. So remove the top and bottom of our carvable pumpkin. And again, looking back, you probably only need to remove the one side of the pumpkin, but I did both so that I could stick the fabric both on the top and bottom, just because I'm using a strip of fabric. If you're going to just remove the top portion of the carvable pumpkin, you could just cut a circle, and you'll see with the velvet pumpkins how I did that. But you could just do a circle of fabric and then stick it all through the top hole. But with this strip of fabric, we're going to just be sticking it in both the top and bottom of our pumpkin with our pins. You could also use the hot glue gun if you'd rather. And just go all the way around your pumpkin. I had stripes on this fabric, so I wanted to make sure the stripes were kind of all going in the same direction. And just continue doing that until the pumpkin is completely covered. If the pumpkin was covered, then I just took this nautical rope and I just attached it in the top and bottom of the pumpkin to make 6 different sections. You can do 6 to 8 sections, and you can use rope, or you could use twine, or you could use chunky yarn, whatever you have on hand to make these sections. But adding that chunky yarn or the rope just really adds some definition to the pumpkin. This one, I think it gives it the coastal look, which is what I'm going for. So it couldn't be any cuter or more appropriate, and this is really fun, especially for those of you who live in coastal areas for fall. This is a fun way to decorate with the coastal vibe. And once I had attached all my rope and I had it in place with my pumpkin, then I just cut out a piece of fabric that was in the shape of a circle, and I attached this on the bottom of the pumpkin, hot glued it in place. You could also use cork or something to fill in this bottom hole. I just used this little piece of fabric, and then I took my driftwood here and I'm just going to use that as a stem. I picked that up on the beach and it just fit perfect for a stem. Took my twine, and again I tied some of it around the driftwood stem, and it gives it a little bit more of the coastal vibe. So here's the pumpkin. It's really cute. My husband asked if we could keep this one. So this is really cute for fall, and it's a different type of vibe, which I thought was fun. If you're like me, you'll occasionally see yarn or fabric in a craft store and just have to have it. Well, I saw this chunky velvet yarn recently, and I had immediate visions of turning that into some pumpkins for fall. And so I started again with my pumpkin by removing the top and bottom of my pumpkin. And you'll see, I actually cut this pumpkin a little bit too wide. I would recommend doing a slightly more narrow opening for these pumpkins, but I'll show you how I fixed that. Again, I took my pin and I just pinned my chunky yarn in place. You could also use the hot glue gun as always, and then we're just going to take the chunky yarn. I cut about a strip that was 120 inches long, and then I just am going to wrap my pumpkin with the chunky yarn. And again, kind of works best to just grab it all like in a handful and then kind of push it through the center of the pumpkin. And you probably will end up using a little bit more than 120 inches of the yarn, but I find it a little bit easier to work with when it's not so much yarn. And so if you have to cut an extra piece of the yarn, then that's really not a big deal. And actually, another way you could do this is by just cutting the top of your pumpkin and then just cutting the yarn into little sections or little pieces, kind of like we did with the trim. But here you go. This is after my pumpkin was completely covered with the yarn. You can see how beautiful this is. It already looks just really stunning. And to fill in the hole, I did take a large cork and I just put that in the bottom. And then you could use the birch logs, but I thought with this velvety pumpkin that a real stem would just be perfect. And so I had this large pumpkin stem and I just hot glued that on the top of my pumpkin, and the bottom was wide enough that it covered that opening, which I had cut a little too big like I mentioned. But so cute, turned out just right. And I did another one in green with a hair donut. I have a video for that as well if you're interested. But you can make these beautiful pumpkins, and so easy, anyone can do it, but you never know it when you see them. Now, speaking of velvet pumpkins, I want to show you how you can make some really easy velvet pumpkins with no sewing involved. So again, we're going to take our white pumpkin, we're going to take off our stem here, and we're just going to cut around the top of our pumpkin this time. We're going to create that hole in the top, and then we're going to take a piece of velvet, and I cut out a square with a circle. I drew a circle in the center of it which is about 24 inches in diameter. And then all you're going to do is you're just going to stuff the velvet into the pumpkin. It could not be any easier, and I think you're going to be kind of surprised at how luxurious these turn out just from some really simple supplies, and you get these really beautiful results. I took my birch log, a real stem would be just as pretty, and you just put it in the hole, and look at how cute that turns out. It is really ready to use for your Thanksgiving or fall table. So pretty and just really cute for fall. And then I wanted to show you, the Dollar Tree does have their own version of the velvet pumpkins. I wanted to show you how you can bring it up a notch, I guess, and that's just by taking a real pumpkin stem, or the birch logs would work as well, and just attach that onto the top of these pumpkins, and look at how cute it turns out. It actually looks much more high-end with the real stem. These are two different versions of velvet pumpkins that you can make with Dollar Tree supplies. So cool, so beautiful, and romantic for fall. This next craft is a boho pumpkin. I'm calling it that because I'm really taking a mixture of my yarn and anything that was available in my yarn drawer, and I'm going to turn it into a pumpkin. Now, I really didn't have a plan for this pumpkin other than I just wanted a variety of textures on my pumpkin, so I cut off the top of the pumpkin like the other pumpkins I made, and then I just started using nautical rope, and I tied that around the pumpkin and attached it with the hot glue or the pins on top, and I just kept adding chunky yarn or whatever I had available in my yarn drawer to the pumpkin. I used a variety of textures and a variety of colors, some grays, some browns, some creams, and just kept layering it on the pumpkin. Now, looking back, I think maybe it would have been a good idea just to come up with a pattern and just repeat it, but I'm a little more random than that sometimes, and I just kept adding yarn on. And then I did plan to use again the birch log in the center for the stem. So once I had a good number of pieces of yarn on, I put that birch log in the center of the hole there, and then I would just stuff the yarn down with a bread knife so that it would be nice and snug in my pumpkin. You can see it kind of coming together here, but once I filled in the different spaces on the pumpkin, I felt like it was really starting to look boho-ish. It looks very random and kind of natural looking, which is a look I was going for. And so again, use up what you have on hand. All these different chunky yarns look really cool, but you could also do twine, the nautical rope, you could use lace, you could use strips of fabric. So be creative and just use up the things that you have on hand, or if you like the chunky yarn and you don't have it on hand, you could always get that as well. Some of the chunky yarn has different shades in it, so even if you did a couple of different colors, you might have a wild mix of yarns even with a couple pieces of chunky yarn. But once I had covered the pumpkin completely, then I took a piece of leather and I just glued that onto the bottom of the pumpkin to kind of give it a resting place. And here you can see the finished pumpkin. I tied a piece of fabric ribbon around the top, and there you go. Well, with the editing, so please bear with me, but I started with a black carvable pumpkin. I ran a utility knife around the center and broke it into two different pieces. And I just took one of the pieces and painted it with this cocoa brown Annie Sloan chalk paint. I just covered it with a couple of coats of the chalk paint. Then I took this Give Thanks word in this black acrylic paint, and I just covered the words with the paint. And then I took some black and white burlap and I covered a canvas, it was 11 by 17 I think, with the burlap. You could use regular burlap or any kind of fabric or paper you have on hand. Just covered it with the fabric, hot glued it on to the top and bottom. And then I took a piece of craft paper with white polka dots. I hot glued that on top of the burlap. And then I took a old song sheet of Come, Oh Come Ye Thankful People. I hot glued that onto the polka dots. And then I came back and got my pumpkin which was not completely dried, but I was a little impatient, and I just glued that onto the bottom of my sign. And the next thing I did was take some sunflower picks and I shoved it right into the pumpkin, took my little sign and I attached it onto a wooden dowel. And I put that into the center of my flowers. And now I have a cute little sign to greet people with for fall. It'd be perfect for Thanksgiving, but would also be a cute Friendsgiving present for someone. I might be gifting this to one of my friends. So here we have it again, all of our pumpkins and projects that we made just by using 10 Dollar Tree carvable pumpkins. I love it when they turn out so fun and inspiring. I hope for you and that you'll at least try one of the projects this fall. Let me know down below which one is your favorite and if you'll be trying any of them. Otherwise, just thank you so much for watching and joining me, and I hope you have a great fall.